You see the footage. The man is on stage. The lights are hot. He's in one of those white jumpsuits. Black sequins and jewels catching the light. He looks like a king. He looks like something not quite real. A living myth. Then he starts to sing, and the myth disappears. The king is gone. All you see is the man. The song isn't a rocker. It's not a hip-shaking anthem. It's slow. It's a ballad. And it's a confession. His voice isn't playful. It isn't cocky. It's heavy. It's filled with a kind of quiet pain that's much louder than any scream. He stands almost perfectly still. The energy isn't in his legs, it's all in his throat, in his eyes. He's singing about failure, about not doing the little things, not saying the right words, about being too caught up in himself to be the man he should have been. Every word sounds like it's being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. It sounds like regret. It sounds real. Too real for a stage show. People watched this. They saw a man unpacking his own heart in front of thousands. And they all knew. They knew who he was singing about. They knew what had just happened in his life. The performance wasn't just a performance. It was a public apology. It was a man grappling with the end of the most important chapter of his life. And he was doing it the only way he knew how. Through a song. To understand that performance, you have to understand the story that came before it. You have to go back to the beginning. Back to when he was a soldier in Germany, and she was just a teenager. Their story was a fairy tale, or at least, it looked like one from the outside. He was the biggest star in the world, a force of nature who had changed music forever. She was young, beautiful, and completely captivated by him. He met her, and he was smitten. He brought her back to America. He set her up in his palace, his home called Graceland. It was a strange life for her. She was living in his world, a world of constant attention, of yes men, of people who lived and breathed his air. He was the sun, and everyone else was a planet in his orbit. He shaped her. He dressed her. He molded her into his ideal woman, and she loved him deeply. But it was a love born in a bubble, a golden cage. For years, this was their reality. And he would go off to make movies. He would tour, he was surrounded by his crew, his Memphis Mafia, and she would wait at home. She was the keeper of the castle, the girl waiting for the king to return. They got married. It was a quiet ceremony in Las Vegas, tucked away from the press as much as possible. It was supposed to be the start of their forever. Soon after, their daughter Lisa Marie was born. And for a moment, the fairy tale seemed complete. The king, his queen, and their princess. All safe inside the walls of Graceland. But fairy tales aren't real life, and the pressures on them were immense. His fame was an ocean. It was impossible to stand against it without being swept away. He was never just a husband. He was never just a father. He was Elvis, and Elvis belonged to the world. The cracks started to show. They were small at first, then they grew into canyons. He was on the road constantly, especially after his big comeback in '68. He was back on stage, feeling that rush of adrenaline, that adoration from millions. It was a drug. A powerful one, and it took him further and further away from the quiet life of a husband and father. Stories of other women were constant. It was part of the life, part of the myth. He was a god of rock and roll, and temptations were everywhere. He was not a man known for resisting temptation. Back home, she was alone. The castle felt less like a home and more like a beautiful prison. She was a young woman. She wanted a life, a partnership. She didn't want to be a beautiful object left on a shelf. She grew up. She was no longer the teenage girl he had met in Germany. She was a woman with her own needs, her own desires. She needed a present husband, not an absent icon. The loneliness became unbearable. And eventually, she sought comfort elsewhere. She had an affair. It wasn't about revenge. It was about connection. It was about feeling seen. Feeling like a person, not just a possession of the king. When he found out, he was furious. But perhaps he was also heartbroken. He was confronted with a reality he had helped create. His neglect had left a void and someone else had filled it. They tried to fix it. They tried to put the pieces back together, but the pieces no longer fit. The fairy tale had shattered. They separated in 1972. It wasn't a bitter, screaming split. There was a deep sadness to it. A feeling of failure on both sides. He was losing the one piece of normalcy he had in his insane life. He was losing his family. This is the man who walks into the recording studio. Not the king, not the legend. A man in his late 30s watching his marriage fall apart. He's heartbroken, he's confused, he's probably angry at her, but angrier at himself. He's filled with a swirling storm of regret. What could he have done differently? What should he have said? The song is put in front of him. It was written by a few talented songwriters who had no idea what was happening in his private life. They had written a song about a man acknowledging his own shortcomings in a relationship. A man who admits he was preoccupied, that he didn't show his love, that he let the important things slip by. But, and this is the key, he insists that despite all his failures, she was always there. In his head, in his heart, always. It was like someone had read his diary. It was like they had reached into his soul and pulled out the very words he couldn't articulate himself. This wasn't just another song to him. This was his story, right now, in this moment. The recording session was intense. He poured everything into it. The hurt, the guilt, the love that was still there, buried under all the pain. You can hear it in the final take. His voice cracks, not from technical imperfection, but from emotional weight. He isn't performing the song. He is living it. He is confessing. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. That line lands like a punch. Think of all the time he was away. All the stories she heard. All the lonely nights she spent in that big house. He knows. In this moment, singing this line, he knows he failed her. He wasn't the husband he should have been. He was too busy being the star. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have. It's an admission of neglect. Not a lack of love, but a failure to show it. A failure to be present. He had the world at his feet, but he couldn't manage the simple, human task of making his wife feel loved every day. The fame, the schedule, the entourage, it all got in the way. Little things I should have said and done. I just never took the time. This is the heart of it. This is universal regret. It's not about the big fights. It's about the small moments that were missed, the compliments not given, the hands not held, the quiet thank yous that were never spoken. He was living life at 100 miles an hour, and he sped past the things that truly mattered. But you were always on my mind. There it is, the defense, the plea. It's his explanation for everything. I messed up. I was a fool. I was selfish. But don't ever think for a second that I didn't love you. Don't ever think you weren't the most important thing. You were always there, even when I wasn't. He records his song in the spring of 1972, during their separation. The divorce isn't final yet. There is still a flicker of hope, maybe. Or maybe it's just the fresh, open wound of the breakup. By the time they officially divorce in October 1973, the song has become his truth. There's that famous photograph of them leaving the courthouse. They're divorced. Their marriage is legally over, and they are holding hands. She is smiling gently. He looks serious, but there is no anger. They walk out not as enemies, but as two people who shared a massive part of their lives and are now sadly letting it go. The love didn't just vanish, it just changed form. It became a memory, a source of pain, but also of affection. After the divorce, something in him broke. Priscilla and Lisa Marie were his connection to a real world. They were his anchor. Without them, he was adrift in the strange sea of his own fame. The loneliness that had always haunted him now consumed him. Graceland was bigger and emptier than ever. It was filled with people, but he was profoundly alone. His health began to decline more rapidly. His dependence on prescription drugs escalated. He was trying to numb the pain. The physical pain from his demanding stage shows and the deeper emotional pain of his isolation. He was surrounded by people paid to agree with him, to laugh at his jokes, to give him whatever he wanted. But he had no one to tell him the truth, no one to be his partner. He had lost his queen. So when he gets on stage during this period, in the years after the divorce, and he sings that song, it's not an act. He's not just recalling the memory of the breakup, he is living in the consequences of it every single day. He looks out at the audience, thousands of loving faces, and he feels a wave of adoration. But it's the love of strangers. It's not the specific, intimate love of the one person who knew him when the jumpsuit was off. The one person who saw the man, not the myth. The performance becomes a ritual, a way for him to process his grief in public. He's not just singing to the crowd. He's singing to her wherever she is. He's singing to himself. He's trying to convince himself of that last line, that she was always on his mind. Maybe he's trying to make up for the time she wasn't. The raw emotion comes from that truth. He's a man who had everything the world could offer. Money, fame, houses, cars, the love of millions. And he lost the one thing he couldn't buy. A family, a home. He sings the song with a stillness that is captivating. In his early days, his power was in his movement. The shaking leg, the swiveling hips. It was electric, youthful, dangerous. Now, his power is in his stillness. In the weight of his presence, he stands at the microphone like a man confessing his sins to a priest. The audience is his confessional. His voice is richer, deeper than it was in his youth. It carries the weight of his life. The triumphs, yes, but also the deep, deep disappointments. So when he sings the lyrics, you believe him. You believe that he is a man filled with regret. A man who would trade a bit of the fame, a bit of the glory, to go back and just hold her hand a little more often. The song gave him a way to say, I'm sorry. He was a proud man. It wasn't in his nature to show weakness, to admit fault. But in the lyrics of another man's song, he found his own voice. He could say the things he struggled to say in person. I wasn't perfect, I messed up, I'm sorry, I loved you. It resonated with people so deeply because it was a human story. Everyone has regrets. Everyone has looked back on a relationship and thought about the little things they should have said or done. Everyone has felt that feeling of loving someone deeply but failing to show it properly. He was the biggest star on the planet, but in that song, he was just like us. A flawed human being trying to make sense of love and loss. He was a master interpreter of songs. He could take a song and own it, make it feel like he was the first person to ever sing it. But this was different. He didn't just interpret this song, he inhabited it. The line between the singer and the song vanished completely. As the years went on, his performances became more erratic. The man on stage was sometimes a shadow of his former self. Bloated, tired, forgetting lyrics. But even in his decline, when he sang that song, the truth of it still cut through. The pain was still there, the regret was still real. It was perhaps even more poignant because you were seeing a man who had lost not just his wife, but was now losing himself. He gave the world so much. He gave them a new way to move, a new way to sound, a new way to be. But the one thing he couldn't seem to give himself was peace. The song is a snapshot of that struggle. It's the sound of a man who conquered the world but couldn't conquer his own heart. A man who, in the end, was left with the painful simple truth that even when he had everything, she was the one who was always on his mind. He was singing about Priscilla, he was singing about his own failure, he was singing from a place of profound loneliness and regret that would follow him for the rest of his short life. The emotion was raw because the wound never healed. The song, of course, was always on my mind.